Let's hit it. Welcome, first-time listeners and returners to the Sports Deli, where everyone deserves a seat at the table. Thanks so much for joining us again today. Remember, you can always send us an email to thesportsdeli@gmail.com. Please check out our website at thesportsdelipodcast.com, and you can check me out on all social media platforms at Mike Hootner, whether it's TikTok, Twitter, or Instagram. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sports Deli, Season 1, Episode 5, along with Dr. J and Coach K. I'm the third wheel of this podcast, Hootie Hoot. And running point for us today is current college basketball analyst for Turner, Fox Sports, and CBS, and former head men's basketball coach at UCLA and St. John's, Steve Lavin. And Steve, we're honored. And Lav, oh, he's connecting to audio. Lav, what's up, brother? You hear me, brother?
I can't hear him.
Unmute yourself, Lav.
Here we go.
Oh, he's shutting her down, and he's take two.
406, Steve Lavin. Steve Lavin has left the building.
we got it on recording, though. I got proof.
That was a great appearance by Coach Lavin. We'll look forward to him in a future.
Lav, what's up, brother? Still on mute.
Oh, we can't hear him.
Yeah, he's still on mute.
None of us can hear him, Mike. You don't have to tap your headphones.
Yeah, but he's talking, so
I don't know if he can hear us.
he's probably. I don't know if he has the.
Looks like he's on an iPhone or an iPad.
Yeah, he's on an iPhone, but he's got a.
So he might have to. I don't know if he's used it before, but you might have to authorize.
there we go.
Here we go.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, Coach.
Fellas, how are you?
Good
to
Coach.
see you, Lav.
This
How are
is
you?
great. Really well, thank you. Just got back from a long hike. I'm in Mill Valley.
Oh, nice.
For the weekend, doing some hiking up on Mount Tam and Dipsy Trail and whatnot. So
Love it.
Cool.
great to be with you guys.
Yeah,
I love all
yeah.
the different backgrounds too. We got the UCLA Bruins represented. We gotta love that. Black Lives Movement we got going on. I love it.
The UCLA's just for you, Coach. I mean, it's an absolutely a gratuitous rear end kissing background.
I love it. I love it. We need props too. I have a little vino. So
There we go.
I was considering lighting a cigar, but I wasn't sure if we don't
Oh,
want to
man.
encourage or
Anything goes. You know, I first met you in the early 90s when I worked at UCLA's camp, and you were, I think it was a restricted earnings coach back then. And, you know, I worked camp, and I was so nervous starting out my coaching career. And then I remember going to Charlotte in 1994, and I asked you if you wanted to have lunch, and you were just so gracious back then, and I can't thank you enough. And I've followed you for all these years, and I know you've been through a lot of things, both personally and professionally, that have helped you become a stronger, you know, person, helped you evolve. And, you know, we're just really excited to talk to you today and hear, you know, what you have to say about a number of different topics. And I want to start off with, I don't know if many people know this, but Doug Erickson is going to be in a position to knock off your mentor as the longest standing tenured person in UCLA history, starting his 29th year this year as the Dobo for the UCLA men's basketball program.
Wow. Director of basketball operations, the legend, Doug Erickson.
Legend.
Yeah. Couldn't be happier for him. And it speaks volumes about his character. The fact that he's had such a sustained run at UCLA and working for a variety of coaches. So often when a head coach comes into a new program, he cleans house. But he worked for Coach Herrick. He worked for myself. He worked for Ben Hallen. He worked for Steve Alford. He worked for Murray Bartow. And now he's working for Mick Cronin. So kind of unprecedented in college basketball to have such a sustained run. But his loyalty, his attention to detail, his familiarity with the program and all the key players on that landscape that is UCLA basketball, and also developed a strong relationship with Coach Wooden through the years, and was really an ally of Coach Wooden's in terms of making his life easier, because Coach Wooden, like the Pope, obviously was someone that's sought after and from speaking engagements to people that wanted to visit him at his apartment in Encino, and autographed basketballs, and of course the Pyramid of Success and all the books he authored, including the children's books later in his career that Coach Wooden authored. So Doug was really a friend and an ally of Coach Wooden's, and it was a mutual respect for one another that really was special.
Now, Coach, you talked about changes in leadership and cleaning house, so there must be some benefit. I know sometimes there's a transition coach that's retained. Is that a benefit for someone like you? And what is the benefit to keeping a guy who kind of knows what's going on when you come to a new program?
Yeah, it's a really interesting subject because each scenario or situation, of course, is unique. And so you have to kind of assess the landscape and then make judgments based on, who are the people that you think, if retained, would add value, and where are there necessary changes where you need to bring in fresh blood. So I think that really comes down to having a mindset, a flexible mindset, an openness. And in Doug Erickson's case, I think each coach understood that Doug was a valuable conduit to the past in terms of UCLA's history, also having a feel for the present, and all those things that Doug does behind the scenes, but keeps the machine well-oiled, from summer camps to understanding who certain boosters or donors are, key people on the faculty and the administration, members of the media. So having that constant, in Doug Erickson's case, I think really has been an asset for each of the coaches that have come through the years. Now, as a head coach, when I was at UCLA, I took over on an interim basis. And at that point, it looked as though, it might be a week or a month. At some point, during the national search, UCLA was going to find someone on a permanent basis. And I'd been there 5 years as an assistant coach. And then
Didn't Coach Wooden tell you you're going to start to get real busy pretty soon?
he did. And that was the first kind of inkling, Coach Wooden's way of giving me a little hint or a nudge that, you may end up being the head coach here for the long haul. And it ended up being 7 years, 12 years total at UCLA, and grateful for that run. But the staff was in place. I only had to hire one assistant, Steve Spencer, who at the time I think was coaching professionally in Australia. He's now the head coach at Orange Coast Community College in Costa Mesa. But the staff was already intact. Jimmy Saya had already been hired by Coach Herrick. Michael Holton had been hired by Coach Herrick. Doug Erickson was still on board. And then, of course, everyone just elevated, and we brought in Steve Spencer. And then there were, decisions I had to make in terms of when Michael Holton left to become the head coach at the University of Portland. I hired Gerald Matkins. And when Steve Spencer left the Orange Coast Community College, I hired Patrick Sandel. Now, St. John's, completely different situation. I go into St. John's, and now I have to make those judgments or choices that you asked about initially in terms of, is there going to be anyone I retain, or am I going to bring in all new people? And I chose to bring in a completely new staff, Coach Katie, who'd been my boss at Purdue, Mike Dunlap, who had experience on a number of levels.
I know Mike.
Yeah, Tony Childs, who's from the Northeast and had a real good feel for not only New York, but he had worked in Philadelphia as well and worked for a range of coaches. And Rico Hines, who was my very first recruit as a head coach. So Derek Roble was our operations point of contact, who's now at Arizona State with Bobby Hurley. So we had an outstanding staff, and later ended up hiring Jimmy Weitzel and Derek Martin, Jason Tilton, and it was really fortunate. The reason we had success was we had a first-rate staff.
Coach, does it get sorry, John, does it get exponentially easier or more difficult in terms of hiring, because you've been in the business a long time, and you must have 1,000 friends in your Rolodex, and there's probably more people you have to explain why they're not getting a call than you'd have to explain why they are.
Yeah, good point. because I was relatively an unknown when I became the head coach at UCLA, which had some real advantages, some disadvantages in certain respects. But to me, it was an advantage because I didn't really owe anybody other than my parents, my mentors, the people that helped me get to that point in my life. And so it does get more complicated as you go down the line, but I think your clarity in terms of decision making and knowing what the right fit is and what matters most, and that or those sensibilities are sharpened through life experience, but also what Malcolm Gladwell writes about so poignantly in Outliers, just doing something, you move in the right direction in terms of understanding it. Mastery is obviously the goal, but we never get to a point where we are complete masters. But I do think there's something to be said for experience, both life experience, which informs the lens or prism we look at the world through, and also our work experience. And those two combined go into making better judgments and better decisions as you move down the line. And so putting a staff together or even team discipline with a player, you don't know what you don't know. The first time around at UCLA, I'd never been a head coach. And so you're really operating based on your training, based on your observation of watching other great coaches. But I had never done it myself. And the second time around at St. John's, you know, a head coach in my final season at 50 years old, taking the Johnnies to the NCAA tournament, I did a much better job of coaching at 50 than I did at 32 years old as the youngest coach in the country and youngest coach at UCLA history, when we went to an Elite Eight and won the conference championship. So I went farther as a 32-year-old, but I was a much better coach at 50, even though our team made the NCAA tournament, which was an achievement for St. John's, but didn't go as far as my UCLA team. So sometimes you can go farther as a coach when you have less experience and be seen as a success, and maybe not go as far later in your career and actually done a better job of coaching. And that's, again, one of the ironies or paradox or contradictions in life, like most of the interesting things.
Did you enjoy it at St. John's, or was the pressure?
I did.
Yeah.
No, it was fantastic. I mean, first, just New York City, Madison Square Garden. I was able to coach in the old Big East. My first year there, we also took a team to the NCAA tournament. That's when UConn, Syracuse, now UConn's back, which is really a positive for the Big East Conference. But Louisville, Notre Dame, Pittsburgh, I mean, you know, all the juggernauts. And it was amazing experience just to go to that first Big East coaches meeting in Florida. You've got, you know, not only the Jay Wrights, the younger coaches like Ed Cooley and, you know, some of the Jamie Dixon, but then you had the Mohicans, like, you know, Jim Boeheim and Rick Pitino and others. So Mike Bray. So it was really cool to be a part of St. John's tradition, and Madison Square Garden being your home court. New York City fans love college basketball. They appreciate good basketball, and just the experience of living in New York was special. And then to also be part of the realigned Big East, which has done really well. So, and working with Coach Katie, my mentor, to bring it full circle, the man that 32 years ago brought me into this business, and then to be able to have him as our basketball Buddha, our Mr. Miyagi of hoops, to lean on, kind of a coach that coached the coaches, and at that stage of his life too, and just the wisdom and experience he could share with our players, not only our coaching staff, but our players. He was like our grandfather, or the old Indian chief of St. John's basketball.
Go ahead, John.
Coach, you know, you've been at some premier programs, St. John's and UCLA, and one of the big things is for smaller schools to be able to play you guys. And that normally takes place in November and December. And what a lot of people, in addition to being exciting to play like a UCLA or traveling to play at St. John's at the Garden or even on campus, is that those games pay. You know, those are the that many times pay for the assistant coaches at the low D1s. If with COVID going on, those games don't take place, and we move to a situation where we're just playing conference games, what do you think the state is of programs such as the St. Peter's, the Fairleigh Dickinsons, the Portland States of the world moving forward? Because the money's not going to come. That's where the money has come from for years.
Yeah, it's really a intersection or a juncture in our games history and in college athletics history, where it's going to take some creative thinking, resourcefulness and ingenuity, flexible approaches, because going back to, we just don't know what we don't know. And
Right.
the virus itself, aside from college athletics, is something that informs us on a daily basis as science gets involved and we learn about the virus, not just in this country and around the globe, but now take the NFL or the NBA or college athletics. So I don't have the answers, but there's no doubt that, the NCAA, in college basketball's case, the Coaches Association, the NABC, USA Basketball, and the NBA, because they, one way or another are tied to this game that we care about. And so people putting their heads together and thinking creatively will have to kind of find the way to chart a new course. It's never going to be the same again, but it's how do we adapt? How do we evolve so that we can hold on to what's good about the game, but also navigate through the challenges you're talking about in terms of, from a fiscal standpoint, the budget. And I think I've heard all types of possibilities about, the power conferences breaking off, and there've been talk about that even before the coronavirus, and in particular because of football, the influence of college football. So I think, over this next year to 3 years, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see some dramatic change, and we'll look back and realize there was no choice but to pivot and kind of move in a different direction, with, everyone's, with everyone's best interest at heart, but there are going to be maybe some tough decisions. And I do worry about mid-major basketball programs, and programs that don't have football, and even conferences like the Big East, because they've had great success since the breakup, the realigned new Big East. But that was because, Villanova was getting to Final Fours, 2 national championships, and the teams that came into the realigned Big East have also performed at a high level. Butler, Creighton, have been exceptional in terms of newcomers to the league that have really added value.
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead, Mike.
Steve.
Go ahead, Mike.
In between CNN and Netflix and hiking, I'm just curious. Say Earl Watson calls you, and he's having a hard time, and I think we're all on a daily basis talking about some of the things that everyone else is talking about. But I know Kevin Love and some other players have come out and talked about mental illness and mental health, and things are cyclical. And I know right now with the pandemic, I think there's more hope with the Black Lives Matter movement than there is with the pandemic. And there's a heightened level of anxiety with the pandemic, and the discussions about now it's an aerosol, not just droplets. And, what would you say to your team? What do you say to former players that maybe call you for advice and say, Lav, coach, I'm scared shitless. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm, help me here,
Yeah, well, it's interesting. For starters, I've been fortunate, blessed to coach such gifted individuals. Mm-hmm. And I've learned more from my players than they learned from me. And when I think of someone like Matt Barnes, who had a great basketball career at UCLA, had a 13-year career in the NBA, and got an NBA championship with the Golden State Warriors. But, he has a platform now, him and DeSean Jackson. I think it's All the Smoke, if I'm not mistaken. And, Josiah Johnson, the younger brother of Chris Johnson, the son of Marcus Johnson. There's that UCLA legacy. But Josiah Johnson doing some really interesting things with social media. in terms of creatively using humor and his gift to put together, really thought-provoking posts. And Earl Watson doing the same as a foot soldier in the community, whether it's back home in Kansas City or it's in Southern California. And Earl's really career, because of the fact that, he's Black, right, and Hispanic, and is a champion for people. And Earl's someone that, went back to school throughout his NBA career and just got his degree last spring. So he finished up, close to maybe his 40th or 41st birthday. And so the young people, both at UCLA I was able to work with and at St. John's, it's really juxtaposition of those two experiences. It's really been fascinating because the UCLA kids that I coached, the young men, are now somewhere between their mid-40s and their late 30s. And then my St. John's players are in their mid-20s to late 20s. And so they help inform me in terms of kind of bridging the gap, because as head coaches, we continue to get older. And the young people that we coach stay the same age, but then they begin to grow older, and there's always that gap, and they bridge that gap in terms of giving me a more informed sense of what's happening in their worlds. And that helps me in my broadcast career. And when I, go back and forth between coaching and broadcasting, I'm bringing a more informed perspective, more acumen to whatever I do. So I'm just so proud that we have young men who are representing the right cause. They're champions of the right cause, and they're involved. They're rolling up their sleeves and participating in a very active way. They have a voice, and I think as a parent, as a teacher, and a coach, really long haul, that's what you hope for. It's nice to win games. It's nice to make runs in the tournament. If you have a bad season, the fans are upset at you, and you lose your job, and we get that. That's part of big-time college athletics. But what teachers and parents and coaches that are worth their salt are really after, the ones that influence my life, my parents and mentors, youth coaches, certain teachers, faculty members in college, the people like Coach Katie and Coach Herrick, they're after something else. They're trying to help you win at life, and they're trying to instill the right virtues and values that'll sustain you beyond a game or a particular season or an outcome of an NCAA tournament run or losing in the first round. I mean, they're seeing the bigger picture, the game of life, and that's what I've always been after. And so young people inform me, and I'm eternally grateful for that.
Coach, can we talk a little bit about your broadcasting?
Sure.
That's
First,
because Gordon has a broadcasting background, Lav. That's why he's so interested in
Yeah.
well, actually, I'm interested because Coach Lavin has a broadcasting element to what he does, and the interview's about him. It's not about me. But here's what I want to ask you about, Coach. I want to ask you a couple things. First, an observation. You are a great public speaker, and I've Mike forced me this past week to look at some things that maybe I would not have normally looked at. Several interviews and a couple of podcasts that you've done previously. You're very composed. You think well on your feet. I mean, and listen, you've been around. Neither you or I are young. We're probably a year apart. We're probably both September babies or thereabouts. So I kind of get the vibe. Can you talk a little bit about public speaking and how that sort of evolved for you in coaching? And was there a Gladwellian tipping point for you?
Boy, that's a question that has a lot of layers to it. It's a good question. Where to begin? For starters, my father was an English literature philosophy teacher, had a love of language, very similar to Coach Wooden, who was also an English teacher. And so those two English teachers influenced my life profoundly. They were natural wordsmith. They had a curiosity about words, and enjoyed poetry and good literature. And I think that definitely had a profound influence on me. So language, because of my father and Coach Wooden and their reverence for writing. And my father also authored 17 books on writing and composition. He also was co-director and co-founder of the Bay Area Writing Project, which started at Cal Berkeley. Now there's over 250 writing centers. But the idea was bringing teachers back to campus for half a, academic calendar year or a full academic calendar year. And it was sharpening their own teaching methods, their own writing, and really their thinking, because, it begins with the architecture of your thinking, and then it's putting it down on paper, and then it's being able to speak it. I call it the triple threat, right? Good thinking, good writing increases the odds of being a better speaker. So kind of like breaking down the game into part whole teaching methods, right? 1-on-1 to 2-on-2 to 3-on-3, and learning how to play before you move to 4-on-4 or 5-on-5. And so, it starts with really examining your thinking, and then beginning to sharpen your writing skills. And then I think that helps the ability to speak, in a more organized way, back to the architecture of it all. And then in sports television, when I made the transition from UCLA to ESPN, Brent Musburger, took me under his wing, and he started as a sports writer. And then he was in traditional news on television, and then transitioned to sports as a broadcaster. But having him as a mentor, we were at ESPN 7 years. I think 5 years we worked together on the ABC Game of the Week on Saturdays. Then we did Big Ten basketball on Tuesdays and Thursdays. My last years, I was fortunate to work with Dave O'Brien, another outstanding broadcaster. And studio is different than games, obviously. And it's never easy when you transition into a new career. But I did have familiarity with basketball. And so that helped, having been a coach. But I think language, growing up in a home, my mother was an art history major. My father was an English major. Having those teachers in the home, and they were unique in terms of, because my dad was teaching not only at Drake High School, but at Cal Berkeley and San Francisco State, College of Marin, and Dominican College. And my mother's kind of focus within art history was Edward Hopper. And so, but they brought us 6 children raised on educator salary to see all the film festivals in Berkeley and San Francisco. So we'd see Charlie Chaplin film festivals, Fellini, Cocteau, Truffaut, Italian and French filmmakers.
And now you're teaching a class at Chapman.
That's right. Take a broadcasting class at my alma mater, Chapman. So
that's awesome.
So I think, but Brent Musburger, no doubt, as a singular mentor, taking me under his wing and teaching me about sports television and what's most important and what to kind of amplify. So from year to year, I could make the adjustments, modify, and therefore deliver a better performance for the viewer at home. And it's always changing, right? That theme keeps coming up here, but being nimble, and these are things Coach Wood talks about in his Pyramid of Success. It's what sports teaches us. Being nimble, being flexible, being interested enough and humble enough to be willing to change, and doing the self-examination, the critique, and listening to others and studying others, because you can borrow. I always would tell our players, hey, there's nothing wrong with borrowing something. You see a player in the NBA, or even a player we're going against when we're doing our film study, and you look at his footwork, or something he's doing without the basketball to free himself up for better shots by using his teammates as screeners, working on your inside-outside dribble to create distance between yourself and a defender to get a shot off. You still have to be yourself, but there's nothing wrong with borrowing a recipe and adding it to your cookbook, or borrowing a certain move. And I'm always studying both traditional news. I watch CNN religiously. I watch CNBC. I'll watch some local news, but I also watch sports broadcasting, both studio and game broadcast, because I want to see what's new. Just like if you're a musician, right? You want to see, what the new jazz is. If you're a dancer, you want to see the new dance steps. What's happening in every industry? That kind of fusion, I think, is really important. And that's being an eternal learner and being interested, which was another thing that the great mentors and teachers, the example they set was they were interested. They had a natural curiosity. They were intellectually stimulated by ideas and good conversation and reading and that openness to continuing to learn. Coach Wooden, the last time I visited him at 99 years old at his apartment in Encino, was in the midst of doing a deep dive on all world religions. And I thought that was so interesting. Here he is, just short of his 100th birthday. He passed away, I think, June 4th in 2010, my first year at St. John's. And it was a couple months prior to his passing. And he said he was looking for the common threads, the golden rules that bring all these religions together. He said it's been genocide and carnage and bloodshed, all the strife, right, over differences in religion. And to him, as he got older, he said, I happen to be a Christian. He said, but I'm realizing as I do this study on all world religions that they're the same. There are some differences, but the most important elements are the same. And he was looking for that common ground that would bring people together and be less divisive, because he realized how religions have been the root often of these awful hate and crimes and genocide and the kind of the dark, ugly side of human nature, and masked in religion or their faith, that they're freedom fighters, and really it's genocide. Or they're missionaries, but really they're wiping out entire civilizations. So that's someone that, like Coach Wood, and he set such a profound, powerful example in being an eternal learner and being interested right to his final breath.
Well, that'll teach me to ask a multi-layered question, because now it's impossible to follow up because there's like 8 things in your response.
So
Every time in my mind I'm thinking I'll follow up here. You bring something up. So do you watch your own stuff?
Yes, absolutely. And it's painful, in particular, going back and watching the early years in broadcasting, where you're still learning the mechanics and just getting accustomed to someone talking in your ear as you're, winding down, going to the break, or there's an upcoming promo, and, paying attention to the game that's happening, but also listening not only to your broadcast partner, but we're also having a conversation with a sideline reporter and your producer and your director and the stat people that are doing the graphics. So there's a lot there. So you have to learn to be listening on a number of fronts, but also be able to articulate while you're doing that listening, being able to speak fluently and coherently and in an informed manner, and also entertain, because, this is not hard news. This is not, the world events. It's a basketball game. And so keeping that in mind as well. So it's a fine line. And again, back to reps, back to being interested, as you mentioned, watching your work so you can improve. I hired a coach as well, that we would sit down the off season together, and we'd actually, look at the transcripts, because sometimes when you watch yourself and you see things in terms of the way you're speaking, it's really helpful if you put it on paper and then look at those words on paper as opposed to in live TV, and how to sometimes tighten your verbiage.
So Brent Nussberger never said during one of the commercial breaks, I can't work with this guy. Jesus Christ. Give me somebody else in here.
I was very fortunate. We were so different. I grew up in San Francisco. He grew up in Montana. And yet somehow our politics were dramatically different, but we hit it off in terms of being broadcast partners. And I feel fortunate that it was at that stage of his career I was able to work with him, because he was doing it more for fun. He was a superstar when I worked for him, but he was a megastar maybe a decade before. But he would approach the Little League World Series with the same professionalism, the same fervor and enthusiasm as he would a Super Bowl when he was at CBS, leading that studio with Jimmy the Greek and
so cool.
Jane Kennedy and Irv Cross and company.
He was as close to perfect as I think broadcasting really can get, because I know you worked with him, but to me, he's a guy I grew up, having him paint a verbal picture for me on games. Maybe I don't know when he started, but I feel like late 70s.
Yeah, and he wrote his own material. He's not one of those guys that relied on others to, Tucker Carlson recently, right, with some of the headlines that have been made. Someone else was writing what he reads in the teleprompter. Now, he may revise, tweak it a little bit. Hopefully, he tweaked it a lot based on recent reports. But, Brent being a journalist at heart, an old newsman,
right,
and moving into sports, I think is one of the reasons why he was so great. He knew when to pivot as the story changed. There were different headlines. So we might come into a broadcast with a certain idea, a premise of what our headline is. And sometimes it would go according, par for the course. But other times it's changing. And he had a gift, and working, through that headset and his talkback, like a great conductor, a symphony that we could create based off everyone listening to the Big Dog. That was his nickname, Big Dog Brent, because we knew, back to the Malcolm Gladwell, his experience was as good as any in the history of sports television. In some ways revolutionized sports television in terms of the studio and the way it looks even today. All started with Brent's ability to go live to all the different stadiums on, NFL Sunday, and where you could actually see, where it was snowing, where it was misty, and where it was sunny. And some of that played into clearly the fact that he was ahead of the curve when it came to sports gambling. And that's why, he's in Vegas right now and has got that network running. And he had just a real interest in the numbers, and he could weave it in to broadcast for those that, enjoy sports betting. Badgers, Buckeyes, sitting on an 8, sitting on a 6, timeout. We'll be right back. We've got a
That's
damn,
awesome.
So, or that.
Well, you guys have
that
something in
basket.
common though, because
Let me give my last brand.
Go ahead. Yeah.
My last brand. That basket may be more important than the casual fan realizes. At the end of the game.
The other one, mark it down at 13:04. So and so fouled out. Mark it down.
Right.
We may come back to that. Ooh, that's a timeout. They didn't want to take it there at 11:09. You want to wonder if they didn't want to wait for the TV timeout. Didn't want to wait.
There was a game at Wisconsin where they, Bo Ryan started to kind of put the walk-ons, the guys at the end of the bench, and worked hard, and understandably as a coach, you want to give those guys a chance to get a little burn, a little action. But Brent, looking at things through a different prism or lens, would say it might be a little bit early, coach, to be going to the bench at this point. Maybe close this one out in strong fashion. What do you think? So and I was torn, because you're seeing little scrappers, little pepper pots out there finally getting a little run. Brent's looking at something else. I had to find a happy medium.
You talk about the numbers, like someone will make a random shot and he'll say something like, that shot's important to somebody.
Exactly.
It moved the line, it moved the number, even though it didn't make a difference in the game, because somebody is happy or not happy about Jimmy Johnson off the bench scoring with 2 seconds left.
Exactly. Someone's going to turn that ticket in, and someone else is tearing it to shreds.
Right.
We'll be right back.
Just so you know, John is the guy you take to the All-Star game who walks down the street and spots George Gervin from behind, sitting at the local bar having a beer. So
nice.
That's his thing.
My favorite one was Connie Hawkins at the Champions booth at the NCAA tournament with no one talking to him. I literally went up to him and go, I'm like, you're Connie Hawkins, right? He goes, yeah. I'm like, can I get a picture? I'm like, and I spent like 20 minutes talking to Connie Hawkins. Like, why is no one talking to Connie Hawkins? Everybody's worried about the free hat, and Connie Hawkins is standing right there.
Right. I used to tell our kids all the time, Google it. Like I talk about a certain
Right.
player from the past, like Elgin Baylor, who could float and had the grace of a dancer, right? But with a basketball in his hands, and could make like so many of the great ones, make the court smaller. Bird, Magic,
Right.
Elgin Baylor, another of those, LeBron, clearly, but they have an ability, independent of their size. Size helps, but they just played the game in a manner where it looked like they were in complete command and the court was smaller. And that's a kind of an interesting, it's almost counterintuitive, but I would tell our kids, Google it. If you want to learn about Elgin Baylor, look him up, and the ones that were interested, the ones that are now coaching or in the NBA in some form, would look in. They were interested in the history. And I think that's important. That while the future is important, the present's important, and we need to do the best we can in the present to create a better tomorrow. But we also can learn from our past. We want to look back long enough to learn both the good and the ugly,
Right.
and then move forward in a more informed fashion. And I think sometimes this generation, not to sound like an old curmudgeon, but maybe doesn't have the natural curiosity about the history of music or the history of sport or the history of cinema, the history of any interesting subject.
I think some of that is because you can Google it. I mean, back in the day, all of us here, we would go to the library.
Good point.
And if you're like, we talk about this with my colleagues, if you go to the library back in the day, you're researching something, you may come across something else that you learn about in the microfiche in a story. Now, if you just Google it, you're going to get right to it. And you didn't learn about the things that came up to it. And,
good point.
And it takes away the curiosity of these kids because they don't have to.
Yep. That's a really important distinction. And I think you can take that to life. We were hiking today in Northern California, these interesting trails, the Dipsy Trail that led to this other trail. And I'm always careful when we plan, a weekend like this, because I don't want it to be so scripted that it doesn't allow for some spontaneity, and maybe a trail or a journey that's more interesting and leads to a day that we could have never anticipated if we just had the blinders on and come hell or high water, this is the trail that we have to stay on, or this is the path we have to stay on. And I think, again, metaphor for parenting, teaching, and coaching, that the best coaches are flexible, whether it's from, one decade to the next, one team to the next team, or one timeout to the next timeout, in terms of adjustments and being open to what do we need to do right now, and not being so focused on, well, this is the way we've always done it, so we have to do it that way.
Which coaches, which coaches as a broadcaster in the locker rooms you've been in, have you really learned the most from, that surprised you maybe more than you ever thought, that you didn't see on the outside, or what meets the eye initially?
Yeah, well, it's interesting too, because it's almost like different categories. When I look at CEOs that are just running their programs at such an elite level, I think of Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Tom Izzo, and there's others, but Lute Olson was, would have been one of those, Jim Calhoun, right? But sustained decade after decade, a CEO that's just, has a juggernaut. Then there are guys like Bo Ryan, who, similar to Dick Bennett. Yeah, they came up the old school way. Coach Katie was this way as well, coaching on different levels before getting to Division I as a head coach. And Bo Ryan, year in, year out, I mean, what the run he had there, I don't think they ever finished in the Big Ten during some, pretty impressive years. The Final Fours, the back-to-back Final Fours, and the number of, conference titles and conference tournament titles. And that sounds cliche, but, the players coming and going, but his ability, even though the names changed, to kind of inculcate that swing offense. And then within the swing to show some flexibility in what part of the swing offense they were going to amplify based on their personnel, but also based within a game of something that was working. Because everyone gets a chance to post up in that swing offense. Everyone gets a chance to step out. They're all interchangeable. And so it gave him the flexibility to take advantage of a matchup, whether it was size or foot speed, that he felt would be to his advantage. That's one of the reasons why through his tenure, they got to the foul line and there was a free throw shooting, discrepancy. And it wasn't that the referees favored him. It was kind of his approach, because he inverted his thinking. A lot of people think, okay, bigs are down low and the guards on the perimeter. He put the littles inside and stepped the bigs away. And he recruited, the marriage of the talent that he identified and recruited and signed, married to his system and style of play, is what made him so effective. Randy Bennett, in terms of, at St. Mary's, I think year in, year out, just remarkable, the results, and, not having a football program, not, operating in a power conference. And yet you look at the numbers. Amazing. Obviously, we know Mark Few would be another one of those CEO. He's at a point now over the last couple of decades where he's in that category with Roy Williams. I think Jay Wright and Tony Bennett, and again, it's hard to boil it down. There's so many good coaches, but I'd say Jay Wright and Tony Bennett right now are the two of their generation, the two best of their generation. And Tony Bennett, he's like a Jedi, just in terms of, not just the national championship, but 30-win seasons, winning ACC championships. And it's a really strong academic school. So it's not as though, he can recruit a wide base, not only because of his system and style of play, but also because of the academics. So he's got a narrow target group that he's trying to recruit, and then to get them to consistently perform. Now, it's interesting. Dick Bennett, Bo Ryan, Tony Bennett, Randy Bennett's another Bennett. He's not related to that family tree, but it does have that 6 degrees of Wisconsin small colleges and Wisconsin roots. And but Jay Wright, I think, is an example where we've talked about the flexibility. Everyone focuses on, he looks great, and he's got the nice suits and the Armani shoes and whatnot. But you look at what he does in terms of coming off of losses. I don't think there's anyone in the country that bounces back. He'll take a beat down, get taken to the woodshed, but he learns from it and comes back, and they'll rip off 18 straight wins, and it's like they're going to win the Big East again. It's the same story, or there they are again in another Final Four. And so I think his ability to connect with kids, build confidence, that's a big factor to it.
Oh, we lost Lav.
Oh, here we go. Take 3 coming up.
Does he know?
What questions? I'm sure his assistant will come through and help. Anything else that you guys want to ask?
I was probably, if we have the time, I was going to ask how he would handle social media, with the Black Lives Matter. And if he's a coach now, the responsibility of social media, but also not trying to stifle what these kids want to say.
And I'd like to, can we enter into that by asking him about coaching? Because he's mentioned an interest in going back into coaching. I want to see if that's still where his mind might be, if the opportunity is right. And then John could take it.
Yeah, that's fine. Sounds good.
Okay. So you'll go, Gordon?
Yep.
Okay.
You're good, Lav. Don't worry about it.
Do you guys have me back?
What you get. That's what you get for having AirPods instead of the old
right. Oh, exactly.
Skywalker gaming headphones that I got here.
Yeah. True.
How you doing with time? You all right for another 5-10 minutes?
Good.
Okay,
absolutely.
cool.
I'm good.
Okay. So Mike, do you want to pick up, or do you want me to go in a different direction?
You have anything else you want to finish with along those lines that you were talking about?
That was good.
John, go ahead.
Good.
No, I'm gonna lead it in.
Okay, go
Coach,
ahead,
Coach, you've gone on the record, I think, recently as saying if the right job came along. Is that fair categorization that you'd still be interested in coaching at the D1 level?
Yeah, no doubt. The right fit is the key.
Okay.
And,
so go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I was 7 years between UCLA and St. John's, and I was ready to stay in broadcasting to the finish line unless a good fit presented. And St. John's checked all the boxes in terms of conference, recruiting base, a great city, tradition and heritage, Madison Square Garden.
Support.
Support was outstanding. I lost the president that hired me, and that happened at both UCLA and St. John's, but that's kind of part of the business we're in, and just the nature of corporate America and college athletics. There's more turnover, both presidents, athletic directors, and coaches, because of the 24-hour sports news cycle, and because of the focus on revenue streams.
Not to put you on the spot, but would you consider a
Yep.
historical black college as a possibility for you?
Yeah, I'm open-minded in terms of that element. It's really about the people and the fit. Meeting those people and having a sense for their values and how they see college athletics as part of, a larger curriculum in higher education. And
We might see a turn with historical black colleges. It could change.
Coach,
Mm-hmm.
I was curious. You were out of coaching for 7 years, but you were on TV every week, so people knew who you were. Especially, what advantage do you think that has for you if you were to go back in? And you talk about the fit, not being in the game, but people recognizing you, and especially more importantly, recruits recognizing you because they're watching games. How is that an advantage over, let's say, being the number one assistant or coming up from a lower level, trying to get to that higher level? What do you think the advantages and obviously disadvantages are that you saw when you went to St. John's? And is that still today? Or because of social media, has some of that changed, that maybe people that weren't as well known, but people are reading their Twitter feeds and all that they're getting more traction with recruits than they would have 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's still important, that you win. So, a Villanova assistant is going to have a leg up over an assistant at a program that's not having success.
Sure.
And, UCLA, Brad Holland, who was an assistant, moved on. Tony Fuller was an assistant, moved on. Mark Godfrey, who was an assistant, moved on. Lorenzo Romar, an assistant, moved on. Greg White, an assistant, moved on, because we were having success. And so if you have success like Villanova has, those assistants, are going to have a great opportunity to
Terry
become a
Bozel.
head coach. That's right, Terry Bozel. Yeah, I think he went to Laverne and then later the athletic director at Chapman currently.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. Doug's the one that just stayed put, right?
That's right.
Sometimes the best move is no move, right?
Yeah.
Not only in coaching, but in life. So I do think the advantage of being television is similar to a sabbatical for a professor. You're able to step back, you get a wider angle lens, a wider angle view, and you're able to travel the country and watch these coaches prepare their teams the day before a game, and then on game day during shoot around, and then of course courtside during the game. You've got the best seat in the house with the telestrator and the ability to draw on replays, and also just spending time with the head coaches, the assistant coaches, seeing what the latest trends are, the latest language in terms of breaking down drills and different defensive and offensive schemes, maybe wrinkles that have been added to some traditional offenses, or different rotations in terms of defenses. So there is a big advantage to step back, and I think that's the real gift, is to decompress, but also to see things through a different lens or prism, where if you're just on that hamster wheel constantly, while it's admirable, and I admire the guys that have done that for 4 or 5 decades, but it's going to take a toll on your health and naturally on your family. It's a tough business. So I do think there are more advantages than disadvantages. As a matter of fact, I didn't really see any disadvantages because I enjoyed doing the coaching, but I also enjoy the television. I'd say coaching is 1, and 1A would be broadcasting. But they both inform one another, because when you coach, it informs a perspective that you can then bring to your broadcasting. When you're broadcasting, your acumen increases, your knowledge base, and you get to bring that back to coaching. So Gruden, pushed the limit some with the Monday Night Football, but now being back with the Raiders, it'd be interesting. You guys should have him on next week to get his perspective on it.
Well, we'll appreciate your help booking that, Jess. Thank you.
Absolutely.
We need to call Brent for that.
That's right. In Vegas.
The Raiders play
Pulling
by
the
play.
strings.
In Vegas.
That's right.
Coach, because you do have an interest in getting back in the game at that level, and because there's such a tightly knit relationship between the TV package and the NCAA, do you feel completely free as an analyst? Do you feel like you need to kind of be more measured and stay within a bounds? Have some bounds been set?
Well, that's a thoughtful take. I would say you clearly are aware that when you're an employee of ESPN, ABC, now CBS Turner and Fox Sports, you're aware that everything you do, you need to be mindful of, because you're also representing this larger entity. With that said, I haven't found myself in situations where I'm not sharing a perspective because of fear that there'll be some backlash from my employee. But you are aware, no doubt. And just like when you're coaching university, you're making the best possible judgments, right, and choices, not only because you're trying to be a good example for the young people that you're coaching, but also because you're representing something bigger than yourself. And you don't want to do anything that would embarrass or hurt the people that you're working with.
What about peers? You do have a lot of friends in the business, and sometimes you're going to have to turn the spotlight of your critique in that direction. Is there an unwritten rule amongst the fraternity that's done in a particular way?
It's probably those that you're closest with that you feel more comfortable sharing, and there's that trust or rapport, similar to with our players, right? Or the best parenting. It's what's so interesting about these themes are so often kind of consistent. They run through, they transcend sport, and they move into parenting and teaching and leadership. And I think establishing rapport and trust, and also that you have their best interests at heart, that you're not trying to bury them. And, what is the dynamic, where are you choosing, not critiquing them while you're live on air. But if you're traveling, as Brent and I were through the country, barnstorming like jazz musicians when we were calling games coast to coast, there's a lot of opportunity while you're on flights, while you're driving through these, different parts of the country, or getting a bite after a broadcast where it's more immediate and you can give feedback and ask questions as to why you made that choice. Or, one of the best piece of advice I ever got was, I think, my third year at ESPN, and Brent, in the middle of a broadcast, asked for all my notes. And I thought he was kidding. It was during a commercial. He said, give me your notes. I said, I'm not giving you my notes. I was kind of protective about my notes. And I could then tell he was serious. So I folded everything up and handed it to him. I didn't know what he was going to do with them. And he put them on the other side. And so, he was now between me and my notes. And he said, we didn't hire you to be looking at notes. He goes, wow. We have people at ESPN that can read those notes and then give a report on it. The sideline reporter can do that. We can send it back. Yeah. Andy Katz can do that. We have other people, but your job is to respond to what's happening on the floor and to take us on a virtual tour through a coach's eyes of what's happening in those huddles, what's going to happen in that locker room, what's going to happen, in terms of adjustments at both ends of the floor. And we're just going to have a conversation about that. He said, because what makes you unique is you've actually done this. So the coaches, and the teams that we're covering, you've coached against, and you've, these guys. So you faced Roy Williams and Coach K and Jay Wright and, Rick Barnes. So, and it was a breakthrough for me. Now, it didn't mean I didn't bring notes, but I was being over reliant on my notes. And he said, no, all you got to do is just look and respond. Tell us what's happening, why it's happening. Just teach us like you would your team. And that was, for me, a breakthrough in my career. So, and it doesn't mean, again, I tell some younger broadcasters, I go, I'm not saying don't be prepared. Don't read notes. But once the game starts, if you're an analyst, it's not about the notes. It's about this live event.
They hired you for a reason.
And bringing that perspective. Yeah.
Now, did you mention to Brent that that would have been good information to have in the pre-broadcast meeting instead?
Yeah, I should have. But, I think it shows how thoughtful he was, that he had worked and he knew I was eager and hungry. Matter of fact, the other best piece of advice I ever received in broadcasting was from Brent. And it might've been my first year working with him. And I just said, what's the single most important thing to having a sustained career in broadcasting? I said, just one. I don't want 3 or 4 or 5. Just give me one. And I'll never forget, Detroit Metro Airport at the Westin Hotel. And the hotel there is in the terminal. So it's an ideal. We had done probably a Michigan State, Ohio State game. And now we're at the hotel after the game. We're going to fly somewhere the next day. And he leans back, he goes through a couple beers first, then he moves to the wines. And so he's drinking his red wine and he, leans back in his chair. He says, just one, huh? Stay interested, kid. Stay interested. And at first I was like a kung fu moment, it was like, wait a second, that's it? Stay interested? Karate Kid. And then I started
wax
thinking,
off.
Yeah, I was like, that's it. And then I started thinking, if you're interested in your work, or your craft, your vocation, then you're going to do the right things in terms of preparation, wanting to get better and delivering to the best of your abilities. If you're interested in your relationships, it's a good place to start in terms of your spouse or your partner. If you're interested in the world around you, if you're interested in your community. So stay interested, kid. Only 3 words, but was as important. And I can take that again to every aspect of life, not just a broadcast career, that are you truly interested? Because that means, are you asking the right questions? Are you sharpening that axe so you can continue to perform at a high level?
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to ask you a couple of fun questions. Shotgun, call it this or that, and then we'll give you the final stage to share any final thoughts that you want to share with the world, America, on anything from philanthropy to any of the movements, or any wise words from your amazing experiences over the years. All right, here we go. Snickers or Almond Joy?
Snickers. I like the peanuts.
Ribs or wings?
Ribs, as long as they fall off the bone.
There we go. Fruit Loops or
Melt
Apple
in your
Jacks?
mouth. Fruit Loops for sure, even though they hurt the mouth like Captain Crunch if you eat them too fast. But Fruit Loops, I love it. Colorful, everything about it, right? Just it brings joy to your morning.
You've given a whole new definition to this or that shotgun answer, question and answer. Pac-Man or Tetris?
Pac-Man was key.
Nice. Rock or country?
Rock or country? I'd have to go rock. I'm really more R&B, soul, jazz, bossa nova, but I'd say, the Eagles, the Stones, if we count the Beatles as rock, right? So I'd say rock over country, but I love Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
Gotta love him.
I love it.
Girl named
Iron
Sue.
Man. Yeah, there you go. Iron Man or Captain America?
Iron Man's more intriguing, but I'll go Captain America. But Iron Man's character is probably a little more interesting, but I'm going to go with Captain America.
Nice. What about Hulk or Spider-Man?
Spider-Man. Yeah, Spider-Man.
Why?
Well, partly being a basketball coach, we'd love to have a Spider-Man on our team. I had a player named Don Pointer, who was the closest player I've ever had to Spider-Man in terms of his ability to kind of climb the backboard. I called him Costco because whatever you need, he could dial it up. WD-40 was another nickname of his, basketball unicorn. The guy hopefully sticks in the NBA. The Cavs brought him up right before the coronavirus. But one of my favorite people, and so gifted. but he had Spiderman tendencies in terms of his ability to cover the whole court and climb the ladder, so to speak.
Nice. Tiger or Jack?
Oh, interesting. Now, is that alcohol? Are we talking Jack Daniels? Because then I got to know what Tiger is.
Tiger Woods or Jack Nicklaus? There we go.
Okay. Because I was like, hey, Jack Daniels. Tell me about Tiger. I thought maybe it's like a Japanese whiskey or something. I love my Japanese whiskeys. Nika coffee grain's a favorite of mine. Nika in the barrel too is a really good one.
Oh man, this is
so I'd probably go Nicholson, even though Tiger, in terms of just taking it to another stratosphere in his prime, but Nicholson over the arc of the like a Cal Ripken. I mean, just decade after decade, and his professionalism, I think, was outstanding. So I'd have to go Jack, and I love Arnold Palmer's, as a drink. So I'd say Arnold Palmer or Jack Nicholson.
what I did not know in 1994.
Yes.
Montana or Brady?
Ooh, those are my two favorite. They're both,
Well,
Montana was 49ers and Brady grew up in the Bay Area, and really his role model was Montana. Montana lives right around the corner from me now in San Francisco, in the Presidio Marina area. So I'll see him on occasion on Chestnut Street.
Just like somebody in the entertainment business avoiding.
Well, then you better pick him.
I'm going to go Joe Montana because that was in my prime. I was in high school, and I'd gone through the John Brody, Steve DeBerg era. No disrespect to them, but there were some heartbreaking years and just some really bad years with the Niners during that run. I loved them both because I was a loyal fan of the Niners. But Montana, Ronnie Lott, and Eric Wright.
So predictable.
That group is incredible. Bill Walsh, Seifert.
You're so predictable. Okay,
Uber
or Lyft?
Assistants. You know what? I'm both. Yeah. So if I have to choose one, well, I'm going to go with Lyft because I've heard from some drivers, given that, I'm in Uber and Lyft quite often, that maybe Uber doesn't treat their drivers as well as Lyft does. But again, I haven't been a driver myself, so I'm not speaking in a completely informed, but for the sake of this, part of our show today, I'm going to go with Lyft. All
right. Belichick or Bill Walsh?
Walsh. Yeah, matter of fact, Bill Walsh spoke to my UCLA team, I think in 2002, up at the Niners headquarters. One of the highlights, of my coaching career was just going in there and hearing him talk to our team.
Mike,
that's awesome.
Mike, why don't you do the Jim Herrick impression that you did so many years ago at Garrett?
Come on, Hoot.
Don't make me do it.
Be on time and time's involved.
Yeah. Short, sharp, crisp. 5 guys are gonna run it. Give me five guys. I want to run.
What about the camp comment, Mike?
Which one was that? You have to refresh.
This camp
is very, very, very important to me.
So don't mess up.
That's right. I did not mess up.
There were like 4 things too at camp. When someone asks you, how are you doing? There's only 4 ways you can respond. It was like fantastic, wonderful, super, spectacular. It's a great day to be alive.
Great
You're
day.
The alternative, Lavin. Have you looked in the mirror lately, Lavin? You're not exactly Robert Redford or Paul Newman. You think you're Tom Cruise? You're ugly. He's the best.
Oh, man. Chess or checkers?
High post offense. It's not
That's
the only offense.
Right.
Just the
Coach, what's the station with Bill Walton working at the UCLA camp like?
Shoot it every time you get it.
Is it true?
Shoot it every time you get it.
So is it true that the counselor spends 4 days consecutively telling the kids to pass, and Bill Walton walks in and tells them it's complete BS? You only get a scholarship if you shoot. Just shoot the ball and then leaves the gym. Is there any truth to that?
And fast break, right? Play as fast as you can. Pivot pass, tear fanny, first team to 100.
Let me ask you real quick. Would you ever have expected Bill Walton to still have this following like he has become on I mean, he's talking about reinventing. He's reinventing.
Right.
It's unbelievable. This younger generation, going back to knowledge of how great he was as a college player and taking the Trailblazers. he's just this icon now in regards to it, but a whole, like kind of like George Foreman, like a totally different, arena that people are knowing him in.
Yeah, it's a amazing cultural icon. And I think there's the authenticity that ultimately is what people connect to. The irreverence is up there as well. And it's refreshing that someone on live TV that works for the Disney Corporation is able to just riff. And you never know where that riff is going to go. And that's
for sure.
part of the fun. And he's always been a supporter of mine. So even though he'd be a critic in terms of the broadcast when he was covering UCLA, but he's been a critic of every coach. So it's nothing personal. Right. It's just what he does. But things that, behind the scenes and really helpful with the beginning of my ESPN career. So what a just unique individual. And I love the stories that, Coach Wooden would tell about Bill Walton, and Bill Walton still tells about Coach Wooden. And he keeps Coach Wooden's spirit alive in a real three-dimensional way. It's lively and not canned. And I think that authenticity is what just separates him from really anyone else probably on television right now.
We're going to send John a tie-dye shirt and some Birkenstocks after the show, because I'm pretty sure that's got a lot to do with the marketing.
That's right.
All right, a couple more, and then we'll give you the stage, and then we'll let you go. All right, let's see. Upper or lower body workout?
Right now it's just movement. So I guess that would be lower. In other words, when I was younger, as a basketball player, you'd be in the weight room and lifting weights and whatnot. So now I love to walk, hike, I get on my bicycle. I do a lot of stretching, yoga. So it's really more just for circulation, staying active, getting more oxygen intake, and, wanting, hopefully, knock on wood, to be able to stay active, late into my life. And so I guess it's really more about the lower body and moving those feet one step at a time.
Yoga, you talk about yoga. Gordon and I both teach yoga. So Gordon or me as your yoga instructor?
Oh boy.
I think I'd alternate. Every other day we have.
There we go.
And then maybe I'd have to decide down the line if there was one that I was gonna, go with you or the other. But yeah, I'd say for right now we'll alternate.
Start with Mike. If you survive, then you can. I'll take you on.
Now it's not hot yoga, is it?
No.
Good.
Definitely not.
Good. Yeah, that's dangerous. I'm not a big hot yoga guy. I'm more vinyasa flow. I don't mind if the heat is turned up some, but I'm not into the Bikram where it's 13 poses and the temperature is 100 degrees and you get yelled at.
I'm an Iyengar practitioner primarily, and I'm not sure what Mike calls himself these days.
More restorative.
Nice. That's good. So
Immune
you just
system.
Yeah, you just lay down on the mat and take a nap. That's good. That's restorative. I like it. That's good.
All right, a couple more. Let's go skydiving or bungee jumping.
I think I'd go skydiving. I probably like the idea of the parachute.
Vanilla or chocolate?
Boy, that's tough.
Wow. Did not think that would be a tough one.
Yeah, I'm gonna have
Neapolitan.
I'm gonna go with vanilla because I can add more things to it.
That's a great answer.
Right. Mix
LeBron or
sprinkles
MJ?
in there, whatever. I'm gonna go with MJ for the same reason I went with Joe Montana. That the older school, the allegiance to athletes of my generation. So I'm admitting my bias or my prejudice, but I'm in awe of LeBron James, and I find it comical when anyone criticizes him, or somehow critiques or tries to build a case, that he's not legit. But Michael Jordan, I'm going to go with. I like it. The Bullets, Wes Unseld, Kevin Greavy,
Elvin Hayes.
Dick Motta, Elvin Hayes. That's right. Dick Motta's the coach.
Motta.
Charles Johnson, Bobby Dandridge. Man,
I think Dick Motta at the time was the only NBA coach who never played.
Yes.
Now, is that misspelled, that Bullets? Just want to check. I'm not sure. Maybe not. Okay, good.
Okay,
If it
three
is.
more. Three more.
Okay.
Ninjas or pirates?
I'm going to go with the Pirates, the swashbuckling aspect. You know, just the bottle of wine in one hand, a sword in the other, and, you know, coming down,
Right.
you know, the banister or swinging with a rope somewhere, you know.
Now,
Yeah,
I
so
think it's important to clarify for Coach Lavin that this particular segment of the show was not mutually agreed upon by
It
all
was
of the
not vetted.
co-hosts.
He's gone rogue. Hooter's
Yeah,
gone rogue on
this
us.
is
It was all
Coach,
going so well.
This is all Mike.
you have to edit, do a lot of
We
editing.
tried to talk him out of it, but
We told him this was a bad idea, but that's okay.
he heard that podcast on the betting show that you did, and all of a
that
sudden,
was it.
it was
it.
Yeah, there was no way to reel him in.
Yeah.
He's
Pro bowler or
That's-
poker player?
poker player. You
There we
smoke some
go.
cigars. I like the pace. You know, you don't lose your money as fast. Bowling
All right.
is, bowling
Yeah.
could be treacherous.
Definitely. All right, last question. Randy Fund or Pat Riley's hair?
Boy.
Wow.
I know them both. I'm closer to Randy Fund. So I'm going to go. Randy Fund actually was an assistant at Westmont College, where my brother-in-law was the head coach for 28 years and just retired after a wonderful 600 plus wins career for John Moore. And Randy, you know, would hook it up for me with Miami Heat tickets when Capono was playing for the Heat with those teams, the championship team. So I'm going to go Randy Fund.
Wow. All right, well, this last segment is all yours. Anything else that you want to share with us? We've really enjoyed it. It's been an amazing experience, and honored that you spent time with us today.
Oh, no, it was a privilege for me and an honor, and enjoyed the banter and love what you guys are doing in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement, and, you know, shining a light on a cause that is so important, and at a time where people need to be having conversations about this, and rethinking their own thinking, and doing some listening, which I think is so important. Sometimes, you know, in the silence, you can still be active, but in the silence and listening. I saw somewhere the other day that those letters are the same when you check out listening and silence, and then you think of the power that they have. But that doesn't mean that you're passive. I think, you know, you can be an active listener, and you can care about a cause deeply, but be doing more listening. And I think when I look at my own kind of life, and during these last, you know, couple months, it's been the quiet time, and observing others and listening to others and asking questions, where I've gained the most insight. And, you know, I also think, you know, if you're going to be compassionate and you're going to support an important cause, it's critical that you're informed. You need an informed perspective. And so that knowledge base is really important. And your heart's got to be in the right place, no doubt, right? Coming from a place of love, the heart has to be there. But I think knowledge and being informed, that's where education is so important. Not just the traditional forms of education that we know, kindergarten through 12th, and college and graduate level in college, because you could have a formal education and be ignorant. And you could have never spent a day in college and be as wise as they come, and as informed and as intelligent as they come. So I just think, you know, what you guys are doing with this show to, you know, elevate the conversation, the discourse, having dialogue, asking questions, and really listening to one another, it sets a good example for others to follow, as we all try and do that in this journey to hopefully make this a better place. And there's no doubt in my mind we're moving in the right direction, but I'm also a realist and a pragmatist, And I think realism and pragmatism allows one to have optimism. And I've always told my teams that, hey, I'm going to be realistic about where we are, as a team, both individually, as players. I'm going to assess you and be realistic about where you are. And then also as a group, where we are as a team. But then we're going to get to work, based off that reality check. And that's the pragmatic side. Let's get to work, do the drill work, create better basketball habits, play together better as a team, improve our mental, physical conditioning. And that'll allow us to have big goals, big dreams, be optimistic. So you got pragmatism, you got realism. At the top is where the optimism is. And with this Black Lives Matter and all of the powerful things that are happening right now, we have to stay pragmatic instead of in terms of continuing to do the work, and also be realistic in terms of where we are. And those two will allow us to have a brighter future, a more optimistic view of the world, and really a better place to live ultimately. So, and you guys are doing that on this show through these conversations and through the discourse and the dialogue. So I thank you for that. And I'm grateful for you guys having me on today.
Thank you.
Coach, the self-reflection component on your part, taking the time off is one thing, doing something with that time is another. So I give you credit for, not just the stepping back component, because anybody can step back, doing something with that space and using it for self-reflection and being,
No
interested in growth. No pun intended, right? Anyway,
Yeah,
I think that's
interested.
Stay interested, kid.
Stay interested.
Yeah,
Kid.
exactly. Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Coach, thank you so much. We appreciate it, and keep on keeping on.
Thank you. You too. Be healthy out there.
Yeah, stay safe, Lav, and I'll be in touch, and I'll let you know once it's up and running, and appreciate everything.
Well, and the final thing, Coach, is you're not going to file stalking charges on Mike Hootner after this show, correct?
Right, he will not be calling
we just want
promise.
clarity on that. So, because it could be down to two people being on the show.
Persistence. It's persistence.
I have to give Mike credit because, he was persistent, but also not over the top aggressive. And he allowed me, I think, to change a couple times and showed some flexibility, some nimbleness in his thinking. So that's a gift, right? In recruiting, we have to do that with families and parents. So I appreciate that you were patient also with me changing, I think, a couple times when I thought I was going to have an opening and then something happened. So I think I was
He is
on a
in
trail.
San Diego, Coach. I mean, he's, there's a whole chill vibe in California that I'm sure
That's
you're
true.
well aware of.
And the yoga, something, yep. And
You wouldn't get this, Coach. You wouldn't get this on the Fan in New York.
No.
Mike and the Mad Dog
would not
be up for this.
No. Even in LA,
Yeah.
unlikely. Yep.
Well, and Coach, from one Virgo to another, I think, there's 3 days that separate you're September 4, right?
Yeah, I was the same. I'm the same as Beyonce, which explains
Yeah.
a lot. At least that's what my sweetheart says. Yeah.
I'm September 1st, and let me just say this to you. Sometimes it doesn't really matter how your towels are folded.
Right. I like that.
Just let it go.
The perfectionist side, right?
Just let it go.
Overthinking it, overanalyzing it. Yeah.
Yep.
But that's right up there with Brent Musburger's advice, I got to say.
Probably not.
The towels. Yeah. I love it. No, you're right, though. There's something to be said for that's one of the beauties of, as time goes by with age, right? I was going to tie that in earlier that, at 50 years old as the head coach of St. John's, how different you're, looking at the world and how different you're coaching in terms of your judgments, your choices, your decisions, as opposed to a 32-year-old head coach at UCLA. The objective is the same, to try and win big, win a national championship, win your conference. Your goals are the same, but you look at everything differently. And that's because, like we talked about, life experience informs. Having cancer informs a different perspective. Being fired, right, informs a different perspective moving forward. Losing your mother and father, beginning to lose loved ones in your life, informs a different perspective in terms of what's really important, in terms of compassion, in terms of priorities. Where are you going to put your energy and fuel? And the whole idea as we go down the path, back to Coach Wooden, always learning at 99, doing a deep dive on all world religions. And that's, I think, what's really a universal, not just in the Black Lives Matter, but in the coronavirus, the COVID-19, thing. Are we continuing to try and learn and better the world that we inhabit and we live in? And are we going to try and leave it a better place when our time is up? So that just gets back to, you were talking about the Virgo trait of being a perfectionist and maybe beating ourselves up sometimes. And then as time goes by, you just approach things in a more gentle, I think, a more clear way. I'm ambidextrous. See that? Left, right hand.
That was impressive.
It just fell out. Yeah.
For those of you that can't see,
I can
what
start
just happened
juggling them.
His earpiece just fell out and he caught it with a no-look pass.
This was a big step.
That was
right
outstanding.
To even use these is
he did catch it
only
with
like
his
the
dominant
third
hand,
time.
didn't he?
That's true. I did. The right just
Yeah.
dropped. Yeah, that's pretty good. But yeah, juggling. If I could start juggling the sunglasses with both of these and have a conversation with you now, we're really.
Now we see
after
why
having
won a state championship in high school.
After a glass, I know, and they're going to potentially change their names. So Francis Drake.
I was going to ask you about that too. I didn't want to bring it up, but yes, now that you mentioned it, we talked about that in the preliminary talks that we had before the podcast. Interesting.
I saw a suggestion of just drop the Sir Francis, keep the Drake, and rename it after the vocalist. And
there we go.
Yeah,
wow.
And then that way,
and play in Canada.
Would love it. And there you go. Perfect.
That might be the only place they're playing, because we're sure not playing here.
No, doesn't appear to. Looks. Hopefully, we'll hope for the best on that scenario and see what unfolds here, and wear our masks.
Yeah, please wear our masks.
Mask up.
Mask up. All right,
thank you, Coach.
All right, we'll talk soon. All right.
Really enjoyed it. Be well. Bye-bye.
All right, you too, brother.
Take care.
Much love. Take care.
Likewise.
Well, that was phenomenal.
That was pretty cool.
That was great.
I need to start changing my backgrounds. I'm very disappointed.
He should have left. Here we go. Here we go. Oh God, this guy. He should have. Oh, inside joke, Bob. I gotta change my background. Oh shit! There it is. God bless America.
Oh man.
Boy, he summed it up at the end. He touched on everything we wanted to touch on. There it is. Right, left,
screen.
You know what he reminds me of on the football level? Herm Edwards.
Yeah.
You know that.
Well,
guy
he's always been a player's coach and rah-rah.
Right, exactly.
And people used it against him, but he was sort of ahead of his time. He stayed true.
He's like the Tony Robbins of basketball coaches. I mean, he's super positive.
Right.
Yeah. Totally.
You know, and you get. It's not so much even. You just put aside what he says. He believes it. You know what I mean? Like it's something that's part of him. It's at the cellular level for him, and so you feel it when you're around him. I mean, I don't know anything about his basketball one way or the other, but as a human being, I'd want to spend more time with him.
UCLA high post offense.
There was no camp here before I came to UCLA.
You gotta cut shoulder to shoulder off that young man. Well, that was great. Remember, Black Lives Matter. Stop the Asian hate. Stop the bullying. And please contact your local and state politicians for any group or individual that you feel is being marginalized. Also, wanted to remind all of you, if you're having a tough time, you can always call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and that number is 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255, and they are available 24/7, 365 days a year. You can also always send us an email to thesportsdeli@gmail.com, and you can check me out on Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok @Mike Hoot. Thanks again to our amazing sponsors, Breaking Tea, Sport RX, PSK Collective, City Lokes, and Moolah Kicks, which you can see right here up on the screen. You can search them online at breakingtea.com, sportrx.com, pskcollective.com, moolahkicks.com, and citylokes.com. And remember, it takes a village. And until next time, for Dr. J and Coach K, I'm Hootie Hoot. Much love. Peace. We have 30 minutes of bonus coverage. We hope that you enjoy it. And if you'd like to support us at the Sports Deli, we'd love to have you either make a one-time donation or feel free to make a donation monthly, either 99 cents a month, $4.99 a month, or $9.99 a month. If you have questions about that, send me an email again to thesportsdeli@gmail.com, and I will send you the link on how you can do that. You can also find it at the bottom of every podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. There's a link at the bottom to support the show. Enjoy again the outtakes. Thanks so much for sharing space with us again today. We truly hope that you enjoyed this incredible podcast. I want to at least touch on one or two of our items. We can follow up next week on some other things after Dr. Niehoff is interviewed on Tuesday.
Okay.
But I think we would be remiss if we didn't, no matter how you feel about it, whether it was an overreaction or whether people's reaction were justified in terms of DeSean Jackson's comments, being misinformed himself about Hitler. And one thing I've learned during all of this, these two different things going on, pandemic and movement, is to digest things a little while and see what comes out on the other side. And I have more hope now than I did, and I was sort of along those same lines when I heard these comments, and I'm glad he followed up, and I'm glad that Julian Edelman said what he reached out, and I think that's the way that you should handle these situations, instead of lambasting people who make mistakes, and everybody makes mistakes, and he deserved to be fined, but I don't think he deserved to be let go.
John, what John said earlier, his point about Googling and microfiche, I can't believe he mentioned microfiche in our podcast, but that's also applies to this situation, because you used to live in a world where your comments did live in a bubble. They didn't extend out beyond your sphere of influence. Now your comments, especially if you're a professional athlete, are in the public domain, and they're in the public domain immediately. Globally,
I think all these athletes and anyone, Lav talked about it, his responsibility being, if he posts something and it's taken the wrong way or it's offensive, there's going to be repercussions, at the networks and all that. I think all of these guys, they have enough people. Run it by your agent. Run it by someone you trust. They're not going to change your opinion, but at least run and say,
they can't help themselves. They have Twitter within 2 seconds of hearing something, and they lose their minds.
I know.
Half of them, some of them.
Anyways. So.
Yeah, I guess the thing that comes up for me, Mike and John and Dr. Bob, is just that, like, whatever we decide that the quote unquote rules are going to be, let's follow those. You know what I mean? Like, we're looking to make a more level playing field, as it were. And if one person is subject to reproach for comments like that, then so is he. I certainly don't think he should be condemned for it, but I'm not going to stand behind the comments and say, they're okay because they've been going on for years. You know what I mean? Like,
if you look at the Sacramento play-by-play guy who's been doing it for 17 years did the reverse, where he made I think Kapler, it was less, where he made a statement where he was going back and forth with DeMarcus Cousins, who obviously they didn't get along. And he put a statement out there, DeMarcus Cousins asked him what his opinion was on BLM, and he came back with all lives matter. And then he followed up with that, and the Kings canned him. That's,
you're going to double down, then you're going to have consequences.
Right. So.
Yeah, but if that's what he believes, then maybe it's time for him to go look for work somewhere else.
Agreed. I'm not disagreeing, but but just same with Deshaun Watson. And I think did he really believe it, or did he just get caught in the mix? I don't know. I don't know what's in
So
DeSean.
it wasn't even a factual quote.
No.
Right.
So, anyways.
Well, I got more out of the feelings that I had when Julian Edelman invited him to the Holocaust Museum.
Agreed.
And
Well,
dialogue ensues after that. And
Well,
then
what I'll be honest,
comment.
Mike, what irritated me about it was that the Eagles GM and owner are Jewish. So they should handle it in a different level than if they weren't Jewish. And it's like,
What do you
no,
mean?
no, what I mean is the feeling at least from the media was because the owners are Jewish and the comment was Hitler, that they should be handling it. They're going to be handle it more than someone who's not Jewish. And I just think the comment was ridiculous, whether you're Jewish or not Jewish.
Oh,
And anybody who taking a look at that, but then the pressure that that I felt was put on the ownership to handle it in a certain way because they're now representing all Jews and how they thought about it.
Well, and do you think that wouldn't have come up regardless if they had just responded in way X? Don't you think that there would have been a conversation about whether way X was
Correct.
the quote unquote, way Jewish owners should have handled it or Jewish
Right, I
people
agree.
should have handled it?
Yeah,
So
I
they're
agree.
damned if they do and they're
I
damned
know, that's
if
my
they
point.
don't. Yeah.
That's my point. Yeah, it would put them in a bad spot. And, yeah. I
Um,
want to ask Dr. Bob a
but-
question. Dr. Bob, is there any turning back on this without going back and shutting down for another 2-month period, like other countries have had to do? Did we just fail, and now we have to take a step back and go back to step one, and basically the whole country has to shut down between, let's say, now and Labor Day? Is that the only way this can get turned around, or are we just looking at, and I know Gordon says I asked too many questions, but it tied in, or are we looking at just going to herd immune situation? Is it one or the other?
Well, yeah, I think we are getting very close to. Obviously, it's a public health crisis in this country right now, and I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get a handle on this just by wearing masks and social distancing. I think we're going to have to probably do stronger forms of mitigation, especially if we're going to be nearing that 100,000 cases a day mark, which Dr. Fauci has commented on. Others have said that we're kind of vastly getting to that point, which means that maybe everybody in this country will know somebody or, that's seriously ill or have somebody that, in their circle that, maybe has a fatal outcome from this. So, I mean, that's the seriousness of this. And, I'd still like to see maybe some type of in-person school starting. I mean, I think that would be, because there is such a great need for that, at least at some level, but certainly not in mass form. But as far as contact sports, I just have trouble seeing how that's going to be, able to be done with the way it's surging and exponentially rising at this time.
Now, there's a whole faction of people who are not trained in the medical profession, who feel like enough already. Let's get everybody back in school. Here's the statistics on fatalities. And I looked at a very boring Swedish study and read it thoroughly. And then I did some really basic math. And I don't think of myself as a particularly smart guy, but I did some basic math. At our school, there are 2,200 students. And if I just take those predictions, which may be low, if I just take those predictions, it means that we will have one student fatality in our building of a student with no comorbidity, no pre-existing injuries, and 200 plus others that maybe wind up as fatalities because they had they had an EpiPen or they had pneumonia or upper respiratory issues. And then I look at my conference of 10 teams and I say, in our conference, there's going to be 9 fatalities and another 2,000 fatalities of students. That seems unacceptable. Why is that so difficult for people to understand?
Exactly. I mean, I think we are just on the verge of that situation where, some offensive lineman is going to succumb from this if we keep going down the road we're going down, because we all know that about every offensive lineman or lineman in general is obese by all practical standards, and that's a risk in and of itself. And I just it's just scary to think that that we would try to venture into this when we're really only talking about something that may be temporary, because we may be able to have a vaccine on the first of the year. So it's not like this is the way we're going to foresee our life for the next 2-3 years. I mean, although things will change in some way over the next few years, you know, it's not going to be as dramatic as it is right now.
We hope.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's a reason it's called a pandemic. You know what I mean? Like that's not a phrase you just throw around in the produce section at Safeway. There's a reason it's called a pandemic. There's supposed to be a certain amount of, you know, self-awareness and alert that comes from that phrase. And frankly, we collectively did not do a very good job. I know people say, well, we wore masks and we social distanced and that didn't work. That's not what happened. Maybe 50% of the people did that, but there's another 51% or 49% of the people that didn't do that at all. And that's why you're starting to see those cases in those states, especially in Florida and Texas.
So is the bubble going to work in intercollegiate athletics? I don't think high school can do.
Did you see, Mike, did you see what happened with the soccer league today? They had to shut down a match. They're in the bubble, and they had to shut down a match between the DC team and the Toronto team because a player on each side today, meaning they've been tested every day.
Tested.
Today, they tested positive before the game this morning. And so now they're in the bubble. So now, this is the first time there's been a positive testing. Now, you know, people came into it and then they were quarantined. This is going to be the first
infection in the bubble. Exactly
right. Let's see what happens tomorrow and by Wednesday of how far that spread. Because now, if you've got it in the bubble, now it's trouble. I mean, that's just. I mean.
Well, and there's all kinds of questions at the high school level and other schools to answer that I assume people are working around the clock to try to answer. But you know, what happens if somebody comes into school and doesn't doesn't have a temperature in the morning, but in the afternoon has a temperature? Do you sequester everybody that person's been in contact with? Do they all go home for 2 weeks? What about the 4 teachers they had? Do those teachers go home? Do they get paid leave? Do they use up their sick leave? I mean, I don't see how those logistics get ironed out.
And the other problem they have, some of these leagues are taking, I think, or some of these states, are taking 4 or 5 days to get back on a test. That's just too long. I mean, if you know, there's not everywhere you can do it in 1 hour or 120. I mean, you know, there's the saliva test at a Vault. It's very expensive, but they can test it in 24 hours. And there's some others that can do it in 24 hours, but those are not cheap and school systems cannot afford them.
So Bob, Dr. Bob, is there a time frame after someone is exposed that they will test positive, even if they're asymptomatic? Like, will it show up the next day? Does it take a week? How long does it take? You know,
I don't know if we know exactly how. I mean, that's pretty hard to track and figure that out, but I think it's just a matter of a few days before you would actually test positive, even if you don't have symptoms, clearly. So it's hard. I don't know if anybody has an exact figure on that, but I would say at least a few days for sure. But yeah, that's the hard part about this.
Because it seems like some of these intercollegiate teams are not doing 2-week bubbles; they're doing 3 to 7 day bubbles, from what I've read. So that's changed from the original 14 days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's what it is now.
Well, you know, I know the Big 12 and a couple others are going to wait till the end of the month, but I'm going on record and saying I don't think anything's going to happen until February. I agree. I don't think anything's going to happen until then.
Certainly nothing athletic.
No.
I mean, they're already failing at these voluntary workouts. I mean,
right. Ohio State and Maryland had to shut down after 2 days.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, and they're not even
West Virginia women's basketball. It doesn't matter what sport we're talking about.
Doesn't matter what, it could be water polo. I mean, you know, seriously. I mean, it just, when you put a bunch of people together, it's, you know, gonna be what's gonna be.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts, gentlemen, for this podcast?
Well, for those people who can't see what's going on.
Oh, here we go.
Hoot's got a clothing rack behind him with at least 6 shirts And
There's an 800 number coming shortly.
I don't see any price tags, and I can't tell where I shop for my size.
Exactly.
Say it with me. Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Dr. Bob, any final thoughts? I appreciate you sitting in this whole time. Sorry to the family for having to stay out of the kitchen.
No problem. No, this is an excellent podcast. I enjoyed it. It was great. It was a great interview with Steve Lavin. It was awesome. But yeah, I mean, we're just at a real significant point with this exponential community spread now of COVID. And, you know, Florida just shattered a new record with 15,000 cases yesterday. Of course, what happened yesterday, Disney World opened. And I'm just like, it's hard for me to even grasp that this is going on when we're at such a critical time. Actually, we're worse than square one. We're worse than where we were when we first started in March.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Right. We're actually fostering the petri dish element of society and helping to spread the virus from person to person now.
Well, the frustrating thing is, you guys know I'm in New York, and I'm not in the city, but I'm in the state. And obviously we were ground zero in April, March, April, and May. And what's incredibly is people in New York watch the news, and you could have put us in a time machine 4 months ahead of time. It's the exact same story, just a different location. Don't have enough gowns. People aren't doing this. It's like, did you guys?
Hospitals are 100%.
Right. I mean, and it's like, you really get the feeling that they really thought this was a New York problem or a Northeast problem. And
no, it's always somebody else's problem. That's the sort of the nature of the beast. It's not me.
Right. And whatever you think of Cuomo, he told people, this is coming your way in the next few months. Be ready, be prepared, call us and ask us what you need. And I think they've done a little bit of a better job of knowing when to put people on ventilators and when not. But other than that, it's the same story. You could have just rewound the DVR to any MSNBC, CNN, any show from April and seen the news in New York, and it's now the news in Houston. It's now the news in Miami. It's now the news.
Well, and maybe Dr. Bob would comment on this, or if he chooses. But one of the things society sort of relies on is that you can do whatever you want, and there'll be a pill and a scalpel later on to fix your choice. And this isn't really one of those fix your choice kinds of things. I mean, we hear every day that, medical practitioners really don't have any better idea about how to deal with this than they did 4 or 5 months ago. They're still sort of trying to figure it out. They're not sure whether people should or shouldn't be on ventilators. They're finding that sometimes putting them in a prone instead of a supine position is helpful. But I think they're groping around as well. And so if you're thinking, well, if I get it, I'm going to be rescued, you have another thing coming.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, I hope you guys get a chance to watch the Golf Channel's Race and Sports in America conversations tomorrow, hosted by Damon Hack, an African-American who is employed by the Golf Channel and has experienced a number of things himself as an African-American in terms of race and profiling, and some candid conversations with Steph Curry and Charles Barkley.
Now, hang on a second. I've seen Charles Barkley swing a golf club.
He's 70th out of 71 players right now.
Shouldn't you have to be able to golf to be on the Golf Channel?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
No.
I don't know anything about golf, but I've seen Charles Barkley swing. I've heard him talk about his swing, and his swing is the kind of swing. His swing is the kind of swing you should go play basketball.
He doesn't go on the golf course for the golf.
He was
today. It would be dangerous for other people if he went on the golf course.
Well, anyways, I hope you get a chance to watch it, and we'll follow up with that as well in subsequent podcasts. Great job, fellas.
Thanks. See you guys.
All right. Thanks, Doc.
Yep. Thank you.
How come I only get to see the top of Wex's head?
Because the pizza's down below. Along with that
Diet Coke.
That Oreo Frosty from McDonald's.
No, it's from 7-Eleven because yesterday they were free. And so he got it. If it's free, it's me.
I didn't know it was
right.
free. I wish you had texted me that. It's disappointing.
John, it's been like this for a long time.
Actually,
in a way, $9 million a year.
That was
yeah,
canceled. Actually, it's canceled. But John, if you sign up for the 7-Eleven Awards program, you'll get a free coupon every year before your birthday.
Oh, that's good to know. There's no 7-Eleven around here. It's disappointing.
John, you don't have a Redskins shirt on. I mean, come on. You don't have a Washington Bullets shirt on.
Oh, that's excellent.
I'm not. You think I should have worn a Redskin shirt? I don't think so.
Yeah, that would have been outstanding.
They're going to be called the Red Wolves by the end of the week.
No red will be in the name.
Red Wolves.
Oh my God.
Good luck with that one. Red Wolves. That's your inside source from our.
No, there's like Marty Hutloff's been emailing me. There's all Google it. There's like logos. They've snuck them out.
If they have red in their name, they're idiots. That is insulting.
You think they should go with Warriors?
No, they should go with something completely different.
I'd go with Federals.
Right, exactly. Not Federalists.
No, Federals. Or the Presidents or something like that.
How's my sound?
First time, your sound is fabulous. It sounds like you have a very expensive microphone that you bought recently.
I mean, it's amazing how many people feel they have to go to Applebee's.
Please say that in about a half hour.
I'm like, you don't need to go to Applebee's that bad.
Is Ruby Tuesdays even still around?
You know what? They had them around here. They've closed they've closed up here. They're done. The pandemic killed them up here.
We're fucked.
Totally. The conversation at universities is going to move from athletics to in-person overall.
There's not going to be any more conversation about sports. The conversation is going to be about academics.
Gordon, make up your mind. Jesus.
Now, who is this Linda Lavin that we're having on the show today?
Linda?
I'm going to ask Lav if after the show he's going to file I want to know if he's going to file stalking charges against Mike Gutner after the show.
Dr. Bob's going to be on just as a listener.
Oh, my God.
Oh, shut up.
Well, we're going to
let's just call the show Dr. Bob, and then we can come on. There's Dr. Bob. We can come on as guests.
Yeah, it's going to be the Dr. Bob
I'm beginning to feel that this is actually Dr. Bob's podcast. And we're just,
this is Dr. Bob's podcast.
Apparently, Dr. Bob posts this about 20 minutes before host Hootner posts it and says we're stealing his thunder.
Oh, boy. You guys. I have my typical ethics question that I want to try to squeeze in, which is just basically about, how is he able to
You're talking about Lav?
Yeah.
I'm talking about after Lav.
Oh, okay. What happens after Lav?
Us?
Oh, I see. Okay.
The ratings go down.
The reverse COVID.
That's when we get the reverse. That's when we get Dr. Bob to come in and throw us a life.
Salvage the show.
I just want to say there's no statistical correlation between Lavin leaving the show and the decrease in our viewership.
None whatsoever.
Hashtag more testing.
Is Wendell still going on for 3 hours on his show?
God,
he's still, his show from last week is actually still on right now.
I don't think John even reads our messages anymore at 1 a.m. his time, because Wendell and I are going off on each other in our group text.
I read him the next day. I mean, he's been in his living room for 20 years.
I want to know if that spare bedroom in his condo has been cleaned during that time.
There's probably been no power in that spare bedroom.
John, did Mike tell you that he said something about
he doesn't have a water pump?
He just got a water pump a year ago. What? Say
John?
Yeah.
Did Mike tell you that Wendell made some comments about having kids and what he would name them? And I was like, has the guy had a date in 25 years?
Oh,
I mean, he's already talking about procreating.
You didn't hear this, John?
No.
Oh, Wendell in his podcast goes off about, I'm sorry, but I'm all about Black Lives Matter, but I'm not going to do a resume for my daughter, and her name's not going to be Shaniqua at the top of it. I can tell you that much. It's like, and he kept going in on this whole thing about names. He's like, my son would be named Marcus, and and I was just like, oh boy. Hello everyone, welcome to the Sports Deli, Season 1, Episode 5, starring Dr. Robert Baldwin. That was pretty good, right? You guys were really, you thought this was the real thing here.
Yeah, I thought we were on.
Yeah, you did. There'll be a little warning.
Technically, you're supposed to go in 3.
Right, I've been doing that. Do you want to know what my icebreaker is for Lav, or do you want to be surprised?
As long as you're not going to ask him something ridiculous, I don't care much.
It just needs to be appropriate.
No, it's appropriate.
Can we ask him how both he and Walton came out of the same general vicinity?
They didn't come out of the same general vicinity.
They both came out of LA. They're both UCLA guys. They're both huge basketball. Hang on.
That's not what I consider coming out of the same area. Lav's from Northern California, and Bill is from. They both are from maybe areas that have to do with flower children.
I'm sorry. Aren't you the rabid fan of the Bloomington Hills football team?
Bloomington Hills isn't even a high school, first of all.
Correct.
West
Correct.
Bloomfield.
So you're a Detroit fan, aren't you?
What does that have to do with anything?
Well,
one's from Northern California and one's from San Diego.
So what?
San Diego's a military town. Bill Walton does not act anything. You're talking about
you're
LA.
You're not listening and you're not learning.
How did they go on their respective paths after UCLA?
They do have a lot of things in common. They're both color guys. They're both huge basketball fans. They both have playing backgrounds. One guy's a huge hippie who probably dropped too much acid.
Why don't you ask that question? Because you're
I'm not asking that. I'm not asking that. I do want to ask about the difference between Main Street and Wall Street as it relates to Division I coaches.
John, you think that's a fair question?
Main Street and Wall Street in what regards?
Well, in one of the podcasts, he talked about his time.
But he wrote letters, Gordon. I know what you were saying, but I just want to throw that in there. His dad didn't just make a call. Like, he wrote letters the old-fashioned way.
I've got 500 letters. I didn't wind up at Purdue. Literally, I have 2 file folders filled with envelopes. Name a guy who's coached in the last 40 years.
But he didn't go there right away, though. It was because of some other things that happened, and he was talking.
Not my point. Not my point. My point is that in the podcast, he talked about the great coaches that were in the Big Ten in what he called the Big Ten's heyday. And he said Knight and Henson and Heathcote and
Gene Katie.
Yeah,
Tom Davis.
Right. And so that is an era gone by in coaching. And now the guys that we have are guys that don't wear sweaters and chinos. We got guys that wear Armanis, of which he's probably one of those guys. We got Lav, we got Calipari, we got Patino, and all that stuff happened when the TV package became mega profitable.
Agreed.
And so I'm curious about his take on what coaching is like now. Are coaches' salaries too high? Should players be paid?
I can tell you one thing. I've listened to him. One thing he's talked about is the politics of the AAU, of how he had to spend so much time at UCLA and St. John's, of like literally deciding where people were going to sit at his games at the Garden. Like he goes, you'd be amazed of how much I had to worry about that.
Well, and people talked about this about Patrick Ewing, right? About when he first took the Georgetown job, whose first hand was he going to shake?
Right.
Was it going to be the local AAU club?
Right.
Or was it going to be the big mega donor?
Well, that's to John's point from earlier podcasts about being the most important person on campus. And
the most definitely most recognized. I mean, same idea. Same most influential, most recognized is the football or basketball coach, depending at the school.
St. John's, I don't think has football, but yeah.
No, they don't.
Well, and it's also interesting. Lav talked about how they asked him about what he preferred: the West Coast, the Midwest, the East Coast, and he talked about New York. Now, he didn't coach at schlubby places, right? I mean, he coached at Blue Bloods, even St. John's. You could argue, Louis Carnesecca coached there. Chris Mullen played there. Malik Sealy, I think, played there.
Oh yeah.
He was someplace where you could come in and actually go to the tournament and probably get to the Sweet 16.
Right.
He wasn't coaching at Fordham.
No. So what's your point there, Gordon?
I don't know.
Okay. You said don't ask open-ended questions.
Exactly. I was like, where's this going?
Listen, I got your point the first time, Wex. Hit that Diet Coke.
Whatever concoction you're brewing there in.
He's drinking, what is that stuff called? The fermented kombucha? whatever that stuff. God,
It's not kombucha that I'm drinking.
God, I can't stand the
You
smell
want
of
to
that.
keep guessing? Here,
I wonder what Dr. Bob thinks about kombucha. That stuff is awful.
Well,
What is it, invisible? What is that, Wonder Woman's plane?
okay, here we go. Here we go. Wex, I'm glad you finally woken up on the calls.
Yes. I got actually, who, just so you know, and Gordon, my question for Lavin is going to be, if they don't have,
Jesus Christ.
what is that?
Stop switching your background. Just put the, oh my God.
That's horrible.
I like the bullets the best.
Yeah, the bullets was awesome. You should have done a UCLA St. John's in honor of them. The bullets, they should have stayed with that over the Wizards. Anyways.
As long as it wasn't in Chicago.
But who, Justin Gordon, just so you know, one of the things I'm going to ask Lavin is, if they don't play basketball, which I don't think they will before January, the impact to the low D1 teams that they don't have the pay games. Because I can tell you that's how a lot of low D1s pay for their assistant coaches, is playing the UCLAs and the St. John's of the world. And if they don't have those games,
right,
they may not be able to withstand another year of this, because schools are not going to say, oh yeah, we'll give you 150, 200,000 to pay for that second assistant